Midlife women are holding up the world right now. And some of us might even say that our arms are getting just a little bit tired. We are running businesses and households. We're running marathons, and some of us are even running for office. We are half the population, and we influence the majority of consumer and family health decisions. Yet media still try to tell us we are over the hill, and marketers infer that we need fixing. And too many women still leave medical appointments feeling dismissed and disappointed. Through conversations with thought leaders, health and wellness experts, and women like you, we are cracking open the conversation on the new truths of midlife. We are replacing hot with whole and bitchy with beautiful. We are pointing you towards quality information so you can get informed and choose the journey that's right for you. Thanks for joining us. Get ready because we are shining a new light on women who are navigating their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond, all with the intention of bringing you one step closer to living your best midlife. I'm Shirley Weir, founder of Menopause Chicks, and this is Live Your Best Midlife. Now, this show would not be possible without our brand partners. And today I want to extend gratitude to Pure Pharmacy, who has supported Menopause Chicks from the beginning. Bob Mayer, who is the CEO of Pure Pharmacy, he and his team truly believe in supporting women in midlife. In fact, it's probably one of the only pharmacies you might walk into and walk out of with a prescription for meditating. Bob wrote a chapter in my book, Mochita, How to Navigate Perimenopause with Confidence and Ease. And he's also the founder of FerroPro Iron, which, if you don't know, iron deficiency can mimic some of the other uncomfortable changes that we experience in midlife. So if you'd like to support Menopause Chicks community in terms of keeping our information awesome and free, I invite you to go to purepharmacy.com/Menopause Chicks. My guest today is a Canadian icon. I am so pleased to welcome Marci Ian. She is a broadcaster. She is a new author of Off Script, Living Out Loud, and newly elected MP for Toronto Centre. And I can't say how fortunate Canada is to have Marci Ian now amongst our leadership. I am so pleased to welcome Marci to Living Your Best Midlife. Let's see if there she is. Hi, Marci.
Hi, Shirley. It's so good to be with you.
I am so pleased to have you here. I've listened to Off Script now twice because I love books on Audible, especially when they're read by the author. So just an amazing accomplishment in the last year. Congratulations. And
thank you.
When this book went to print, you have since had another career change. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think, Shirley, I have to write another chapter or two.
Yeah.
There's got to be a sequel now.
There's an addendum.
Yeah, the book went to print and I decided to run for office. So I put my hat into the ring and was the Liberal candidate for a by-election in Toronto Centre, which we were fortunate as a team to win, and so honored and so excited to be representing the place that I was born in. I was born in St. Jamestown, and so this is so full circle for me, Shirley, but I'm so ready to serve.
That is amazing. Thank you. Now, I have followed your career. I was the first person, after you said yes to this interview, I called my best friend from university. We're both communications grads from Wilfrid Laurier University. And I called her to share the news. And she's like, it's like we grew up with Marci, but we're both older than you. So that doesn't apply. But, as our careers were getting started, we were watching you every morning on Canada AM. And it's just been such a pleasure to watch your career move from mornings to afternoons. I'm a huge social fan. And to now read all of your stories in this book. I want to begin. One of the first stories that you share is something that your dad a seed that your dad planted with you about the dash. And I think that really relates to conversations about midlife because, well, do any of us know what midlife is?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about the dash.
So Shirley, I had been thinking a lot about legacy just before I started writing this book, and really thinking I've got a lot more years behind me in this field than I do ahead of me. And have I used my microphone well? Am I mentoring who I need to mentor? Am I asking the right questions? Am I doing the right things? Am I involved in the right projects? In essence, I was thinking about my dash. And that brought me back to the story that my dad would share with his students every year as a principal. And growing up in Scarborough before amalgamation, my dad's schools were mostly in North York. If there was a PA day in Scarborough, I would sometimes be going to school with my dad in North York because they wouldn't necessarily have one there. So I spent a lot of time in my dad's schools, and I saw a couple of these assemblies where he would bound onto his stage in the cafeteria and hold this cutout of a tombstone. And he'd say to the kids in this big loud voice, "Kids, what's the most important part of this tombstone that I'm holding?" And they'd start yelling out, and they'd yell, "Mr. Ian, it's the day you're born, or it's the day you die, or the name." And he would say, "No, the most important part is the smallest part, and that's the dash. And while you're in my school, I want to make sure that I take care of your dash and that you leave this school a better person than whence you came." And he really just drove home the point that the dash is your life, how you choose to live it. It's that space in between birth and death, and what you do. And I was thinking very much about my dash and about my career at that point and what I wanted to do next. And so I started off script. I started the book with that story because that's where I was at the time.
That's amazing. And I guess, our dash could be any length, right?
Yes.
Like we get to play a role in influencing that. And I love it because, language is really important at Menopause Chicks in terms of like making sure that we're communicating to women in not just language that makes sense to everyone, but that is the right, accurate definition. And midlife sometimes has a lot of negative connotations attached
Yes.
to it. But I
Yes.
love your story of the dash because it's all positive.
It's all positive, but not without risk. And I
Right.
think that's what happens to us, as women. We get to an age and we think we're too old to change. We're set in our
Mm.
ways. Do we try to open a new business? Do we leave that comfortable job? Do we start something new? Do we start a new relationship? We tell ourselves all of these things. And I'll tell you, I got to 50 and a lot changed, but that was a choice. And in my case, it was moving towards a lot of uncomfortable things, discomfort. But I'll tell you, the lessons were in the discomfort. The lessons happened when I started to move towards fear and not away from it.
And risk is a really good word. And you talk about trusting your voice.
Mm-hmm.
So, how can your readers learn? How can we learn to trust that voice, that intuition, as we're navigating anything, whether it's health, career change, new relationship, or maybe just checking off a bucket list item for ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
How do we
Is
tune into
that
that trust?
that inner voice is something, I'll tell you, every time, Shirley, that I've not listened to it, I've gone astray. Great things have not happened. Okay. I've learned that lesson. But there's a funny thing about voice, because at the same time, there's that other thing that happens. And that other thing is the voice that tells us we're not good enough. And there are
Mm.
times when we tell ourselves, we're not good enough to do that. You know, who do you think you are? You can't do that at that age, at this point. And there are times when I've told myself or spoken to myself in such a negative way that I really, you know, looking back at those times, I've thought I would never even speak to my friend that way. I wouldn't tell an enemy the things that I tell myself. So it's about tweaking that. It's about really trying to lower the self-doubt and increase the confidence. But we know the voice we're meant to listen to. It's just that, as I said before, listening to it does not come without risk, and it's scary. But I would encourage people to take the step because it's worth it. And that doesn't mean that you're not going to fall. It just means you're going to know how to get back up.
Right on, right on. I was thinking this morning of a story about a woman who came to me early on and she said, Shirley, you know, I've had this is ironic because you're working in government now. She goes, I've worked in government for 30 years and I just really want to be a florist. And I was like, well, then be a florist. And now she is, but it was almost as if she was waiting for that permission slip.
Yes.
So it's trusting our voice, but what are some of the external factors too that we need to look to gain that permission?
Yeah, it's trusting that voice, but also the example that you gave, being an ally, you know, for the people
Mm,
in your life, for the friends who might have these ideas that may seem a little crazy, but creative and make them happy. And to say, yeah, you know what, you can do it. Because oftentimes it is just having that extra voice, that little push, that little nudge in the direction, and that helps. It also means research
ah,
research and I speak to this, you know, as a reporter, and I still consider myself one as a
absolutely.
reporter, that research is paramount. So if you're going to do something new, or you're thinking about doing something new, your friend, for example, who became the florist, you know, I am sure she looked into all things floral. And then also, you know, researching a good place. Where does she open the business? Where would a, you know, floral business do well? All of those things. So do the groundwork. Make a list. I am very much into pros and cons, the simple things.
Ah,
Writing down the pros, writing down the cons, you know, everything, being really, really honest and open and vulnerable. And then having somebody that cares about you and that you care about, double checking it, checking it to see if you're missing something. Is it feasible financially? How do you get there? That involves research too, all of the things. But I will say, if your heart is in it, then you're halfway home.
absolutely. So, can you share with us one of your favorite stories or a favorite time, whether you wrote about it in off script or not, where you have trusted your voice and followed your heart with a little research on the side?
With a little research on the side. Oh my gosh, there are many times, but I think I'll talk about going to the social.
Mm,
So Canada AM had ended, and it had been my home for 10 plus years as a news anchor and then co-host. And all of a sudden the show had ended. And really I thought, this is where I could retire. This
wow.
is, you know, this is where I could be for 20 years. And it wasn't meant to be. And so the question was, what's next? I knew that I was going to be leaving the newsroom and moving into production. I just didn't know what I'd be doing in production. So at Bell Media, production is where shows like The Social and Marilyn Dennis and E-Talk take place. I didn't know what I'd be doing, but I knew I'd be doing something. I took some time off in between, just by myself. Went to Jamaica. It's my place where I just go and kind of write in my diaries and meditate and recalibrate, all those things. And I made a list, speaking of lists, of things I knew I didn't want. And
Mm,
that's another thing. It's sometimes, in fact, every time I find it's important to know what you don't want to do. You might not always know exactly what you want to do, but you have to know what you don't want to do. Those things that are absolute no's, you need to know what they are. And so I made my lists, I did my things. I knew that I still wanted to do television. I wanted to do it differently. I didn't know what that looked like. I knew that I didn't want to do news. I didn't want to do
Ah,
news. I wanted to explore something else. I just didn't know what it was going to look like, frankly. And so I came back, made my way to the downtown offices where, I was going to be, and met with a couple of producers and talked about a couple story ideas. And then there was a spot on The Social, a guest hosting spot, because one of the co-hosts had been off for some time and taken some time off. And
yeah.
so they were rotating people through. And my executive said, "Hey, do you want to do a stint? Do you want to see what it's like?" And I said, "Sure." And so did it, and it felt good. More importantly, I loved the ladies. It was love at first sight. We had a really good connection and loved being there. And I liked the idea too that it wasn't about telling the stories of others, it was about sharing my own. And
Yeah.
that was something that I wasn't sure about, Shirley. I wasn't sure that I wanted to put myself in that kind of vulnerable place. As a news reporter, there's a certain distance, there's a certain neutrality. But with this, I was all out and open and vulnerable and talking about life and relationships and work and getting personal with things. That was kind of the scary part for me. That was the biggest change. And then there were people, some of them close to me, who said, "You're a news reporter. Now you're going to do this kind of fluffy show, this kind of light
Mm.
daytime show, and doesn't that kind of take a chip out of your credibility? You're a news reporter. That's what you do. This isn't that." And so there were people that, weren't necessarily in my corner when it came to considering this change, but it's the best thing I could have done. And that's the other lesson. Sometimes the people closest to you aren't necessarily giving you the best advice. And it's not because they don't care. It's
Yep.
because, you're not even thinking outside the box. You're smashing the box that they're used to seeing you in. And so it's really a matter of, again, trusting yourself, trusting that inner voice, even when, the people closest to you aren't on board. And that's what I did with this. And really, best decision ever.
That is so powerful, Marcy, because, well, first of all, we're really grateful that you did and that we got to learn more about you and from you. But that sharing, that vulnerability, it empowers others to do the same, to take similar steps in their own journey, not the same ones as yours or their loved ones who might be giving them that advice, but the one that is right for them.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And it is risky to be vulnerable. It's
Yeah, it is.
risky to put yourself out there because you could fail. But again, that's where the lessons are. So what? You fail, you learn, you move on. And we've got to get comfortable with failure. Failure is not a bad thing, it's an
No.
opportunity, it's a really good thing.
And the word that's coming up for me right now is the wisdom that comes from navigating our midlife years. I believe it's something that's not celebrated enough. We've put a lot of energy into fighting off the aging process or, crossing our fingers and hoping that our health maintains the journey, but we're not celebrating the wisdom and the insight that comes from this. That's why I think I really enjoy your stories so much. I think also that people that are listening to this right now might, certainly given the last year that we've all experienced, be asking that similar question of what's next? What's next for you? So what is next for you, Marcy?
Well, it's representing the people of Toronto Centre. That's what's next. And it has really been, I call it MP school, because
Mm,
there's so much that I've had to learn, and a lot of it, most of it, virtually, because we
right.
are in the midst of a pandemic. So it's learning how to, for example, run a constituency office, learning how to hire staff, learning how to put forward a bill, learning how to reach out to constituents, learning how to fundraise. I mean, all of these things are new to me. It's a completely new world. The thing that isn't, though, is connecting with people. And that is the transferable skill here. It's what I've done my whole life. It's what I love to do. And that's what politics is. It's connections. It's connecting with people. It's listening to people and really listening. So that's what's next. And that's what's next for a while. It's really concentrating on my writing, getting to know it a lot better, the people in it. I'm reaching out to people via Zoom calls, hundreds of people, and just, doing wellness checks, finding out how they are, what they need, what they see for the writing, what their vision is, and taking notes and making sure that they know that the door is open, albeit a virtual door right now, if they've got any ideas or need me in any way.
Amazing. Well, the people of Toronto Centre are very fortunate, and so is Canada. So when we fast forward 20 years and you're looking back on 2020, what's the one thing you're going to remember most?
2020 was the year, Shirley, that really showed us who the most vulnerable in our communities are.
Yeah.
That's the big lesson. That's the lesson I'm learning. There's no way we can turn our backs anymore and say, we don't know who is in need. We don't know who we're failing. We don't know who's fallen through the cracks, because we do, because we saw what happened in our long-term care homes. We see what's happening with street-involved people, racialized communities. Like, we see what's happening. So we can't walk away from that. It's an opportunity for us to do better. And when I remember 2020, I'm going to remember that for sure. Also, I'm going to remember what it feels like to slow down, because this pandemic forced me to slow down in many ways. I couldn't go everywhere I wanted to go and quickly, and that's normally the speed. It was slow down. You can only do so much. You can't do it all. Maybe that's a good thing. Sit, be still, take time, because that's something that wasn't happening.
Wow, that's such a poignant reminder. And I have a question that I usually close with all of our guests, and maybe you just answered it, but I'll give you another chance to add. What is the one thing you want women in midlife to know?
That it's not over, that it's not an end, it's a beginning. I'm sitting here at 51 and a half years old, having just left one career that I was in for almost 30 years.
Wow.
And starting another. It's never over. It's never over. Just keep going, keep listening to that voice, keep pushing, and keep creating. We're a force.
We are a force.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing, Marcy. I'm really looking forward to watching the second half of your journey. If you haven't already, please get a copy of Off Script. If you have a book club, this is a great pick. So there's lots of conversations that you can have following Marcy's journey and what she teaches us through her stories. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure.
Yeah, it was fantastic to meet you. Also want to thank our partners again. Please follow the links down below. If you have any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. If something resonated in this conversation today, I invite you to share it with someone else. And I look forward to seeing you next time on Live Your Best Midlife. Thanks.